What if I told you that one announcement just turned the entire car market upside down? This isn't just a headline. Donald Trump's latest mandate has sent shockwaves through the auto industry. Every single car sold in America must now be made entirely on US soil. Think about that. Decades of global supply chains, partnerships, and cost-cutting strategies all thrown out the window in an instant. How will automakers across the globe respond to this game-changing rule? Could this lead to skyrocketing car prices and fewer options for you? And is this bold move a comeback for American manufacturing or the beginning of a trade war? Stick around, because what's coming next could impact every car buyer in America, and it might just change the world. What's happening? What if one announcement could completely rewrite the rules of a century-old industry? Imagine this, an America where every single car on the road is manufactured entirely on home soil. That is not a dream or a lofty vision. It is the mandate Donald Trump unveiled in his latest jaw-dropping announcement. With a single declaration, Trump has disrupted decades of carefully calibrated global supply chains and sent automakers into a frenzy of uncertainty. This is not just a policy suggestion, it is a line in the sand. Trump's announcement requires every car sold in the United States to be 100% made in America. For a country that has long relied on international partnerships to drive down costs and increase efficiency, this represents a seismic shift. Think back to the post-war boom of the 1950s, a time when American factories churned out vehicles that were the pride of the nation. Trump's vision seems to echo that era, promising a return to a time when America's manufacturing might was unrivaled. But this mandate is not just about nostalgia, it is a call to revolutionize the automotive industry itself. Imagine sprawling factories reopening in states like Michigan, Ohio, and South Carolina, humming with the activity of thousands of American workers. On the surface, it sounds like a patriotic dream, but as bold as this vision is, the challenges it introduces are equally monumental. The global automotive industry is a tightly interconnected web. Parts for vehicles often travel thousands of miles, crossing borders multiple times before they are assembled into a finished product. For example, a Toyota Camry might have its engine block forged in Japan, its electronics built in Taiwan, and its tires sourced from Mexico, before being assembled in Kentucky. Trump's mandate seeks to unravel this complexity and centralize it entirely within the United States. What does this mean for foreign automakers? How will they adapt to this drastic new reality? And most importantly, how will this change affect you, the everyday consumer? And this isn't just about cars, it's about a battle for the soul of an industry and its place in American history. But while the vision might sound grand, the ripple effects are already shaking the ground beneath the automotive giants. The first domino to fall. Change doesn't happen without casualties, so who's at risk of toppling first? When Trump made his announcement, the first reactions from the automotive world were swift and divided. On one side, domestic automakers like Ford and General Motors cautiously welcomed the move, seeing it as an opportunity to reclaim market dominance. On the other side, foreign giants like Toyota, BMW, and Volkswagen were left scrambling to reassess their strategies. The reality is that this mandate hits foreign automakers harder than anyone else. Brands like BMW, which prides itself on precision engineering in Germany, now face the daunting prospect of relocating production for models like the 7 Series entirely to the United States. Similarly, Toyota's flagship sedans, traditionally manufactured in Japan, will no longer be welcome unless they roll off assembly lines on American soil. This shift is not just a logistical challenge, it is a massive financial gamble. Factories cannot be uprooted overnight, and building new facilities is a billion-dollar commitment. Consider BMW's Spartanburg, South Carolina plant, which is already the company's largest factory worldwide. While it produces more than 60% of the BMWs sold in the United States, that still leaves high-end models like the 7 Series and X7 manufactured elsewhere. To comply with Trump's mandate, BMW would need to expand its operations significantly, potentially at the expense of its iconic German identity. For companies like Toyota, the dilemma is even more complex. Although its American plants produce popular models like the Camry and Corolla, many of its parts and high-end vehicles are sourced from Japan. The costs of relocating these operations to the United States could make compliance prohibitive. The question now is, which domino will fall first? Will foreign automakers absorb the costs and comply, or will they retreat from the US market entirely? The consequences of either decision will reverberate throughout the industry and beyond. And here's the kicker, the fallout doesn't stop with corporations. It's coming for your driveway too. But before we talk about your wallet, let's look at how automakers are rewriting their playbooks to survive this upheaval. Reinventing the factory floor. How do you rebuild an industry that spent decades perfecting its global roots? Adapting to Trump's mandate is not just about moving operations, it is about reinventing the very way cars are made. The modern automotive factory is a marvel of efficiency, with robotics, artificial intelligence, and lean production methods streamlining every step. But these systems were built on a global foundation. Now, automakers must tear up their blueprints and start over. Tesla provides an interesting case study. As a company already producing most of its vehicles in the United States, Tesla appears well positioned to thrive under the new rules. However, even Tesla relies on international supply chains for critical components like lithium-ion batteries. Complying fully with the mandate means investing in domestic mining and battery production, an ambitious, resource-intensive pivot. Meanwhile, traditional automakers like Ford are leaning into innovation to adapt. Ford is experimenting with advanced robotics and 3D printing to localize production efficiently. By reducing reliance on global suppliers, they hope to build a more resilient and self-sufficient system. But innovation comes at a cost. Retooling factories, training workers in advanced technologies, and sourcing domestic materials require enormous investment. Automakers are essentially being forced to gamble on whether these changes will pay off in the long run. And there's another angle to consider. Could this reinvention spark a renaissance in American manufacturing? Some experts believe the mandate could drive the development of cutting-edge production methods, turning the United States into a global leader in manufacturing innovation. This could turn into something unexpected. America's manufacturing future might look nothing like its past. But while automakers pivot to rebuild, the people who buy these cars face an entirely different challenge: the road ahead for everyday Americans. What does this mean for you, the buyer? The answer might not be what you expect. The consequences of Trump's mandate will ultimately land on the shoulders of American consumers. While the idea of buying a car that is 100% made in America might sound appealing, the reality is more complex and costly. Relocating production to the United States is a massive financial burden for automakers. Building new factories, training workers, and sourcing domestic materials are not cheap endeavors. These costs will inevitably be passed down to consumers, resulting in higher sticker prices across the board. Take luxury brands for instance. Models like the Mercedes-Benz S-Class and BMW 7 Series, already expensive, could see price increases of several $1,000s. Even mid-range and entry-level vehicles like the Toyota Corolla or Honda Accord may become less affordable for the average buyer. There's also the question of variety. To offset rising costs, automakers may streamline their offerings, focusing on high-volume models that maximize profitability. This could mean fewer niche vehicles, fewer customization options, and a reduced sense of choice for buyers. But the impact isn't purely financial. The mandate taps into something deeper, a sense of national pride. For many Americans, owning a car that is genuinely made in America represents more than a purchase. It's a statement of values. The question is whether that pride will be enough to justify the higher prices and fewer options. And here's where it gets personal. This mandate could redefine how we think about patriotism and the cars we drive. But the bigger question looms. What happens when America's rules clash with a global economy unwilling to bend? The world reacts. What happens when America declares war on the status quo? When Donald Trump announced his bold Made in America mandate, the shockwaves weren't limited to the United States. Global automakers, governments, and trade organizations were immediately thrown into disarray. The world's largest car manufacturers, Toyota, BMW, and Volkswagen, suddenly found themselves at a crossroads, forced to choose between adapting to an entirely new set of rules or facing exclusion from the lucrative US market. For decades, automakers have thrived on global supply chains, using a finely tuned system that allows parts and components to be sourced from all over the world. Toyota's hybrid technology, for instance, relies heavily on parts manufactured in Japan, while BMW's high-performance engines are a hallmark of German engineering. Trump's mandate threatens to dismantle this interconnected system, leaving foreign automakers scrambling to maintain profitability. The international reaction has been swift and vocal. In Germany, leaders expressed concern that the policy is an attack on their world-class automotive industry. Japanese officials have called it protectionism disguised as patriotism, warning that it could destabilize trade relationships. Meanwhile, South Korea has already hinted at potential retaliatory measures, signaling that this mandate could escalate into a full-blown trade war. But the fallout isn't just about cars. The broader implications for global trade are enormous. By prioritizing domestic production, America is challenging decades of globalization and signaling that it's willing to play by its own rules. For some, this is a moment of national pride. For others, it's a dangerous gamble with an uncertain outcome. And this is where it gets dangerous. Could a trade war be the price of prioritizing America? As the world watches America redraw the lines, let's examine how domestic automakers are preparing to meet these new demands. The American giants strike back. Can Ford, GM, and Tesla rise to the challenge? Or will they crumble under pressure? The mandate to manufacture entirely in America is not just a challenge for foreign automakers, it's a gauntlet thrown at the feet of American giants like Ford, General Motors, and Tesla. These companies, long considered the backbone of US manufacturing, now face an unprecedented opportunity to reclaim their dominance. But the path forward is anything but straightforward. Ford, for instance, has been quick to align itself with Trump's vision. The company has already announced plans to expand its US facilities, with a focus on boosting production of its popular F-Series trucks and Explorer SUVs. These vehicles, symbols of American utility and design, are perfectly positioned to capitalize on the patriotic sentiment driving the mandate. However, scaling up operations to meet the new requirements comes with significant risks, including rising labor costs and supply chain bottlenecks. General Motors has taken a more cautious approach. While the company is heavily investing in electric vehicles, it relies on international suppliers for critical components like lithium and cobalt. These materials are essential for EV batteries, and sourcing them domestically would require a complete overhaul of GM's supply chain. The question is whether GM can navigate these challenges without compromising its ambitious goals for EV dominance. Tesla, on the other hand, is uniquely positioned to thrive under the new rules. The majority of Tesla's manufacturing already takes place in the United States, giving it a significant advantage over competitors. However, even Tesla isn't immune to the ripple effects of the mandate. The company's reliance on foreign-made battery cells could become a liability, forcing it to invest in domestic production at a time when it's already stretched thin by rapid expansion. These American automakers are not just fighting to survive, they're vying for a chance to lead a new era in automotive manufacturing. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the next few years will determine whether they emerge as champions of a revitalized domestic industry or casualties of a high-stakes gamble. The stakes are enormous. This could either solidify America's dominance or break its most iconic brands. But what about the hidden costs of this transformation? Let's uncover the challenges that could reshape the industry forever. The hidden costs of transformation. Does revitalizing America come at too high a price? At first glance, Trump's Made in America mandate seems like a win for the US economy. It promises to create jobs, boost domestic manufacturing, and restore pride in American craftsmanship. But beneath the surface, the costs of this transformation are beginning to emerge, and they're significant. One of the biggest challenges is the financial burden placed on automakers. Building new factories, training a skilled workforce, and sourcing materials domestically require enormous capital investments. These costs aren't absorbed in isolation. They're passed down to consumers, leading to higher car prices. Analysts predict that the average price of a new vehicle could rise by several $1,000s, putting added strain on middle and lower income families. Small businesses, too, are feeling the pressure. Companies that rely on fleet vehicles, such as delivery services and ride-sharing businesses, are facing rising costs that could ripple through the economy. For example, a small delivery company that replaces its fleet every 5 years might find itself paying tens of thousands of dollars more under the new rules. These increased costs are likely to be passed on to consumers, affecting everything from online shopping to food delivery. Another hidden cost is the potential for job displacement. While the mandate may create jobs in manufacturing, many of these roles require advanced technical skills. Workers who lack the training to operate high-tech equipment or manage automated systems could find themselves left behind in the transition. This creates a paradox, an industry creating jobs that many Americans aren't equipped to fill. Finally, there's the risk of market disruption. Automakers may respond to rising costs by streamlining their product lines, focusing on high-volume models at the expense of variety. This means fewer niche vehicles, fewer customization options, and a diminished sense of choice for consumers. This leads to a sobering question. Who ultimately pays the price for this transformation? Even as the industry grapples with these costs, some see an opportunity for innovation that could change everything. A new industrial revolution. Could this policy spark the most significant industrial shift of the 21st century? So while the challenges of Trump's mandate are undeniable, there's another side to the story, one that hints at a potential industrial renaissance. For decades, American manufacturing has lagged behind global leaders like Germany, China, and Japan. This mandate could be the push needed to close that gap and usher in a new era of innovation. Automakers are already exploring cutting-edge technologies to adapt to the new rules. Advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, and 3D printing are becoming essential tools for streamlining production. These innovations don't just reduce costs, they also open the door to new possibilities, such as customizable vehicles built to order. The push for sustainability is another promising development. Domestic manufacturing could align with broader environmental goals by reducing the carbon footprint associated with global shipping. Automakers are also investing in green technologies such as solid-state batteries and renewable materials to meet rising consumer demand for eco-friendly products. Beyond the factory floor, the mandate could spark growth in related industries. Expanding domestic supply chains for materials like lithium and cobalt could revitalize mining towns, while the development of EV charging networks could transform America's infrastructure. These changes have the potential to create a ripple effect, boosting innovation and economic activity across multiple sectors. But perhaps the most exciting possibility is the chance to redefine what Made in America means. By embracing advanced manufacturing and sustainable practices, the US could set a new global standard for quality, efficiency, and environmental responsibility. And this could be the unexpected twist. What starts as disruption might end in unprecedented growth, but growth is only part of the story. What does this mandate mean for the future of global trade and America's place in it? The global supply chain dilemma. Can America truly disentangle itself from a global economy? At the heart of Trump's Made in America mandate lies an ambitious goal to break the reliance on global supply chains. For decades, the automotive industry has operated on a finely tuned international network where parts are sourced from multiple countries before assembly. Dismantling this system is not just a logistical challenge, it is a monumental restructuring of how cars are made. Consider the supply chain for electric vehicles. The batteries powering these vehicles rely heavily on materials like lithium, cobalt, and nickel. These resources are predominantly mined overseas, with countries like Australia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia playing critical roles in their production. Currently, the US lacks the infrastructure to mine, process, and refine these materials at scale. To comply with the mandate, automakers must invest billions of dollars into developing domestic sources, a process that could take years or even decades. Moreover, supply chain disruptions don't just affect raw materials. Many critical components, such as semiconductors, are manufactured in regions like East Asia. The global semiconductor shortage of recent years exposed just how vulnerable the industry is to supply chain bottlenecks. Now, automakers face the added challenge of reshoring semiconductor production to the US, a move that requires significant investment and expertise. This dilemma raises important questions. How can the US balance the need for domestic production with the reality of global interdependence? Will these efforts lead to greater resilience, or will they create inefficiencies that drive up costs and slow innovation? This sets the stage for a tough decision: sacrifice independence or face skyrocketing costs. But even as companies untangle supply chains, the environmental stakes are growing impossible to ignore. The Green Promise. Could this policy inadvertently fast-track the fight against climate change? While the Made in America mandate is primarily framed as an economic policy, its environmental implications are impossible to overlook. Localizing production could have a significant impact on reducing the automotive industry's carbon footprint, but the path forward is not without challenges. On the positive side, the shift to domestic manufacturing reduces the emissions associated with transporting parts and vehicles across the globe. Currently, the logistics of shipping components from one continent to another contribute heavily to greenhouse gas emissions. By producing cars entirely within the US, automakers could streamline operations and cut down on these transportation-related emissions. However, building new manufacturing facilities also comes with environmental costs. Constructing factories, expanding mining operations, and developing infrastructure requires significant energy and resources. Without strict environmental standards, these activities could negate some of the benefits of reduced transportation emissions. Another critical factor is the mandate's potential to accelerate EV adoption. Automakers like Tesla, General Motors, and Ford are doubling down on EV production as they adapt to the new rules. Advances in battery technology, such as solid-state batteries, promise longer ranges, faster charging times, and reduced reliance on rare earth materials. These innovations could make EVs more accessible to consumers and contribute to a greener future. Yet, the green promise of this policy depends on execution. If automakers prioritize prioritize short-term profitability over sustainability, the progress toward reducing emissions could stall. The challenge lies in aligning economic incentives with environmental goals, a balance that will determine the long-term impact of this policy. And here's where it gets interesting. This mandate could force automakers to rethink sustainability on a whole new level. But as automakers innovate, the question remains, how will society adapt to these rapid changes? Redefining transportation culture. Are we ready to embrace a new era of mobility? Trump's mandate isn't just reshaping the automotive industry, it's redefining how Americans interact with transportation. As automakers adapt to the new rules, society faces a cultural shift in how we think about mobility, ownership, and sustainability. For decades, car ownership has been synonymous with independence and freedom in the US. However, the rising costs associated with domestic production could lead consumers to explore alternative models. Subscription-based services, car-sharing platforms, and autonomous fleets may become more appealing, especially in urban areas where owning a vehicle is already less practical. Smart cities are another aspect of this cultural shift. Urban planners across the country are rethinking infrastructure to accommodate electric vehicles, autonomous transportation, and sustainable public transit. Imagine cities with integrated EV charging networks, reduced traffic congestion, and seamless connections between personal vehicles and public transit systems. These innovations could transform cities into cleaner, more efficient spaces. However, the transition to this new era isn't without its challenges. Many Americans, particularly in rural areas, rely on traditional vehicles for work and daily life. The shift toward high-tech mobility raises concerns about accessibility and affordability. How do we ensure that the benefits of innovation reach all Americans, not just those in wealthier urban centers? This cultural transformation extends beyond logistics. It touches on values, identity, and the very fabric of American life. Will consumers embrace the changes, or will nostalgia for the old ways create resistance to progress? And this leads to an unexpected realization. Transportation might become more about access than ownership. As society evolves, so too must the industry's approach to competition on the global stage. Competing in the global arena. How does America stack up against global titans like China and Germany? The Made in America mandate isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a larger global competition to dominate the future of transportation. Countries like China, Germany, and Japan have already made significant strides in automotive innovation, leaving the US playing catch-up in some areas. China, for instance, has established itself as a leader in EV production. Companies like BYD and NIO are producing affordable, efficient electric vehicles at scale, supported by substantial government subsidies. Additionally, China's control over critical resources like lithium gives it a significant edge in the EV market. If the US hopes to compete, it must not only localize production, but also secure its own supply chains for these essential materials. Germany remains a global powerhouse in automotive engineering. Brands like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen have invested heavily in autonomous driving technology and luxury EVs. These companies have long been symbols of precision and quality, and they're unlikely to relinquish their position without a fight. Meanwhile, Japan's automakers, including Toyota and Honda, are focusing on hybrid technologies and hydrogen fuel cells. These alternatives to traditional EVs offer greater flexibility and appeal to consumers who aren't ready to make the leap to fully electric vehicles. For the United States, the mandate represents both a challenge and an opportunity. By prioritizing domestic production, America has a chance to lead a new era of automotive innovation. However, success requires significant investment in infrastructure, workforce development, and sustainable practices. Without these investments, the US risks falling behind in the global race for transportation leadership. This raises a critical question. Can America lead the next chapter of automotive innovation? But as the competition heats up, the ultimate question is, will the benefits outweigh the risks? Navigating a new normal. Can the automotive industry survive this era of radical change? The automotive industry is no stranger to transformation. From the introduction of the assembly line to the rise of electric vehicles, it has continually adapted to technological and societal shifts. But Trump's Made in America mandate presents a unique challenge, one that forces automakers to balance tradition, innovation, and survival. For companies like Ford and General Motors, this mandate is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it aligns perfectly with their American roots, giving them a narrative of patriotism and resilience. On the other hand, it requires them to overhaul their operations in ways that are both costly and complex. Retooling factories, securing domestic supply chains, and competing for a limited pool of skilled labor are monumental tasks. The question is whether these efforts will pay off in the long run. Can American automakers adapt quickly enough to regain market dominance? Or will the cost of compliance outweigh the benefits, leaving them vulnerable to more agile competitors? The stakes extend beyond individual companies. The success or failure of this mandate could set a precedent for how other industries respond to economic nationalism. If the automotive sector thrives, it could inspire similar policies in technology, manufacturing, and other key industries. But if it falters, the ripple effects could be catastrophic. And here's why this matters. These changes could define the next 100 years of the industry, but as companies adapt, what does this mean for everyday consumers who drive these cars? The consumer of the future. Will buying a car ever feel the same again? For consumers, the Made in America mandate is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it represents a chance to support domestic industries and contribute to the revitalization of the American economy. On the other hand, it could fundamentally change how people approach car ownership. One of the most immediate impacts will be on pricing. With the cost of domestic production significantly higher than global alternatives, the price of new vehicles is expected to rise across the board. Even mid-range models such as the Toyota Corolla or Ford Escape could become prohibitively expensive for middle-income families. This raises concerns about affordability and accessibility, especially for those who rely on personal vehicles for work and daily life. But rising costs are only part of the equation. The mandate could also reshape consumer preferences. As automakers streamline their product lines to focus on profitability, buyers may face fewer options and less variety. Luxury cars, niche models, and customizable features could become rarer, leaving consumers with a more limited market. At the same time, new trends are emerging. Subscription-based car ownership, where consumers pay a monthly fee to access a range of vehicles, is gaining traction. Similarly, car-sharing platforms and autonomous ride-hailing services are becoming viable alternatives to traditional ownership. These innovations could make transportation more flexible and efficient, but they also challenge the deeply ingrained idea of owning a car as a symbol of freedom and independence. This could completely reshape how we think about cars, not just as vehicles, but as experiences. And as consumers adapt, the geopolitical stakes grow even higher. The geopolitical gamble. Could this policy ignite a global trade war or redefine international alliances? Trump's Made in America mandate doesn't just disrupt the automotive industry, it challenges the entire global trade system. By prioritizing domestic production, the United States is sending a clear message to its trading partners: the rules have changed. For countries like Germany, Japan, and South Korea, home to some of the world's largest automakers, the policy is seen as a direct attack on their economies. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has already called for emergency talks within the European Union to discuss potential retaliatory measures. Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea are weighing their options, including tariffs on American exports and restrictions on US-based investments. These responses are more than just diplomatic posturing. A full-blown trade war could have devastating consequences, not only for the automotive sector but for the global economy as a whole. Retaliatory tariffs would drive up costs for consumers and businesses, disrupt supply chains, and create economic uncertainty. However, the mandate also presents an opportunity for the United States to redefine its role on the global stage. By investing in domestic production and innovation, America has the potential to set new standards for quality, sustainability, and efficiency. If successful, this could strengthen its position as a global leader and force other nations to adapt to its example. The question is whether the benefits of this policy outweigh the risks. Will America's bold move inspire collaboration and innovation, or will it deepen divisions and spark conflict? This leads to a provocative question. Could economic nationalism make America stronger or isolate it further? With so much at stake, it's time to look at the road ahead. The road ahead. Is this the bold move America needs, or a gamble too big to win? The future of the automotive industry hangs in the balance. Trump's mandate represents a radical shift in how cars are made, sold, and consumed, but its ultimate success depends on the ability of automakers, policymakers, and consumers to adapt. For automakers, the challenge lies in balancing the cost of domestic production with the need to remain competitive in a global market. Companies that innovate and invest in cutting-edge technologies could emerge stronger than ever, but those that fail to adapt risk falling behind and losing their share of the market. Policymakers face an equally daunting task. Ensuring that the benefits of this mandate are evenly distributed requires careful planning and investment in workforce development, infrastructure, and sustainability. Without these measures, the policy could exacerbate economic inequality and leave many Americans behind. For consumers, the road ahead is filled with uncertainty. Rising car prices, limited options, and changing cultural attitudes toward ownership are all factors that will shape the future of transportation. The question is whether Americans will embrace these changes or resist them in favor of tradition. And on a global scale, the stakes are even higher. The success or failure of this policy will have ripple effects that extend far beyond the automotive sector. It could redefine the balance of power in international trade, set new standards for sustainability, and influence the trajectory of global innovation. And this leaves us with one final thought. The future of the car market might just redefine the future of the world. Trump's bold mandate has thrown the automotive industry into uncharted territory, and the ripple effects could touch everything from your driveway to the global economy. But what do you think? Is this the comeback American manufacturing has been waiting for, or a risky gamble with unforeseen consequences? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you see this as a win for America, or are you worried about what it means for car prices, choices, and the future of the industry? We want to hear from you.